Hi, and welcome to this episode of The Courageous Choice. Really excited to be joined here today with JP Elliott. He's the founder of the Future of HR and host of the acclaimed Future of HR podcast, which has reached 250,000 downloads worldwide. Through his candid conversations with CHROs and other global leaders, he's gained unique insights into what's working in HR today. Today, we're going to talk a lot about courage and HR. And JP, I'm so glad you're here with me. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate the invitation.
It's really fun, as we start prepping for these conversations, we get into kind of what you're seeing out in the world, and I feel like we always get this chance to bring it to our listeners who maybe aren't, in the same bubbles that we're in sometimes. So, uh, you know, maybe you can just share a little bit about kind of the journey you've been on and give a little bit more color so that our listeners can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, happy to do that. I am a 20 plus year HR and talent executive. I've been head of talent for Dick's Sporting Goods. I've been a chief people officer in private equity and head of HR for the Brinks business. And, about almost 3 years ago, I started this podcast. So the first half of my life, HR, talent, geek, and love HR. And then in October of 2022, I decided to launch a podcast called the Future of HR Podcast with really just the idea of I wanted to give back to next gen HR leaders and thought, if I was younger in my career and I could learn from and listen to these amazing CHROs and thought leaders and hear what good really looks like, I would have been so much further ahead of my career. And I've had a great network. I've had a great career, had a lot of people who are friends that I thought could come on the podcast. And I did it. And I committed to doing not just one episode, every once in a while. I committed to doing 52, one a week for the first year. And I did that because I wanted to challenge myself and I wanted to prove to myself, but also my kids that you could do something. And no matter what, no one listened, I wanted to do it. And it just took off. Right. And I think it hit a sweet spot in the market where I think people realized that we don't do enough for next gen HR leaders. And the mission was honest and authentic. And I think I did a great job of bringing on candidate or great guests. I had great guests, and that mattered a lot. And we had just a lot of people support it, which is amazing. And now we're at 275,000 downloads, close to 300,000, and 154 episodes, and this week. And it's been a journey, but that allowed me to actually decide that really my true passion was really about helping to give back and helping to elevate our function and develop next gen HR leaders to be more business focused, strategic, and what I call value creators. And I left private equity in 2024, January 2024, I left and initially was like, maybe I'll get a job. And I decided to build a program called NextGen HR Accelerator. And we sold 22 seats to Verizon, Cardinal Health, Prudential, AbbVie. And I said, oh my gosh, maybe I can do this. And my wife's blessing and the family's blessing, we moved forward. And now I've been doing it for a year and a half or so, and it's going great.
It's such a great time to have that program because when you think, all companies are navigating internal changes and dynamics, and of course, these huge, fast-paced external changes in dynamics, technology, and the skills that HR professionals need to not only deliver what their business needs today, but to grow in their own careers and achieve their aspirational goals. Um, they're significant, and so to have that support of a program like yours that's helping them both strategically, professionally, and I always say with their own confidence, I think that's one of the biggest things as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, HR leaders, we have a huge impact on the field if we can. And so I think we have to continue to invest in ourselves and figure out how to do that, whether it's my program or not. I mean, we need to be helping to invest in that next gen because HR is getting more complicated in terms of the role we're asked to play. The expectations are rising. We'll talk more about that. So I feel very similar to you that this is our time. We just have to step up and be ready.
Ugh, I totally agree. All right, so let's start with your own journey a little bit. Maybe share a pivotal moment early in your career where you had to make a courageous choice, either related to kind of HR or just business in general, and maybe how did it shape your approach today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I had to think about this for a little bit because, while these experiences happen to us, we're not always taking notes. And, no one's recording it like everything else is happening today in the world. But, I think back to when I was a director at a company. I'm not going to talk about what company it was. I was running leadership development, and we had a global leadership development program that was happening. Top 300 leaders were going to this. The CHRO was kicking it off. My boss was going to be giving a kind of keynote. And I had spent a lot of time making sure my boss's keynote was amazing. It was a really, really amazing presentation. Probably one of the best things I've ever done in terms of a speech, if you will, for somebody. And the CHRO really didn't told us that she did not want a very big, fancy speech. So we didn't really do a great speech. Well, we started to review her speech and she had seen my boss's speech. She started to get pretty angry. And we were all over a conference call, wasn't a video call, and started to basically was screaming that this is what she wanted. This was not acceptable. Really pretty upset. And you typically wouldn't see this kind of behavior, but she was not happy and she was letting us know. And we're on a conference call. Everyone is being quiet. This is a global conference call. My boss is not speaking up. And I said the person's name. I'm not going to say their name, but I said name, kind of to stop the yelling, to break through. And I said, "Do you have the speech in front of you?" "Yes, I do." "Great. Throw it away. We're starting over right now. What do you want to say?" And we stayed up pretty much all night, myself, a comms person, someone else, to rewrite a speech that she ultimately was pretty happy about. But the reason I use that story is, yeah, it took courage to speak up because no one was saying anything. We were just getting berated. But most importantly, we can't wait to be called on. We can't wait for the opening. We had to initiate. And I feel like at that moment, we had to sort of break the pattern and I had to initiate something back because, well, you could say it was my boss's fault that we didn't have a great speech. I was the one kind of writing these speeches. It was on me. And so I think you got to initiate. Number two, I could have been really defensive and said, well, actually, the speech we gave you is not bad. We could have argued. Obviously, I wasn't going to win the arguing at that moment, but mostly being defensive doesn't really solve anything. So it was about moving forward. So I didn't even want to talk about what was wrong with it. I just said, let's start over. Like, it's fine. Throw it away. We're just writing a speech. And I think the last piece that I've learned that I've taken with me, I've tried, it's hard, is to be other focused and to think about it from their perspective, how it'll be perceived, what are the risks, what's the ego of this person, what's the politics of the situation. I was a little naive when I wrote that speech for my boss, thinking that he would outshine his boss by a big degree with an amazing, amazing speech, and hers was going to be not as great. And probably was a good lesson there not to overshine your boss ever. So that was kind of the first. I was pretty early in my career, but that one really stuck with me.
That's a great example. I love how you were able to kind of redirect it with a path forward and not escalate it, right? So you shared a little bit about leaving PE and your journey to start the Future of HR podcast. What inspired you to do that?
It's a couple things. One, I'll just say truthfully, my wife and I did not get into podcasts until like 2022. So we were very late to this game. Totally understand that. And kind of coming out of COVID, we were doing walks together and she was into some like listening to Smartless and other podcasts. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. I actually haven't got into podcasts. Let me see what the HR podcasts are like. And so I listened to them and I just was underwhelmed a little bit. And I felt like that they weren't bad, but I didn't think there was anyone really bringing on practitioners that knew what good really looked like. I just felt like there was a hole in the marketplace. And said, I think I'll do this. And I own futureofhr.com for the last 10 plus years. I don't know why I've owned that. I've owned some wacky HR sites that I bought and it just made sense. And so all of a sudden, I decided I was going to do it to show my kids and to show myself I could do it, especially in today and age when you could build something online. And an Amazon box arrived with this microphone. My wife said, "What is this?" And I said, "Oh, I'm gonna start a podcast." And that microphone's my accountability partner. Now that I've spent $250 on a microphone, I have to figure out how to do everything else. And I spent about 3 months figuring it out. And I thought it'd be an experiment. I thought, if anything, it would just be a way to give back. You don't make money from podcasting, of course. Honestly, it's just unless you're like a big time podcaster. What it did though is help me, I think, to build my name again, get people to know who I was, and I think also the relationship build is incredible doing podcasts, and so that really was the big factor for me and why I wanted to get back. And it's amazing to get emails from all over the world, or someone sends "Hey, listen to the podcast. It means a lot. It's been helpful." That part's really been cool, and I've been able to show my kids you could do something like this as well.
It's kind of interesting. I talked to a lot of people about, like, being on a journey, and, um, I'm sure there was a reason that you bought that future of HR domain, and now you maybe know what it is, but it's funny, right? You don't always know the reason, and then they kinda show up later. You've gotten this cool lens, though, and as you talk to all these guests and these leaders that you're speaking to and thought leaders, um, to see different lenses into leadership styles and different organizations. Has that really changed your view at all as you look at courage and leadership today?
When I think about, I guess it hasn't changed what's changed my perception, Jamie, is that, and I get asked this question a lot of like, what have you learned from 150 podcast episodes, 150 interviews? I've learned a lot. And initially I was like, well, I guess I'm learning some tactics. I'm learning about some trends or different ways to approach problems. But what I actually started to realize was I was learning about what a great HR leader looked like. And so it really kind of helped me to formalize that into what I call the what, who, and how great HR leader framework. And so for me, it's really, really clear, right? And so, from a what perspective, they understand what they stand for. They have a personal leadership philosophy. And that kind of really gives them this quiet confidence of they know who they are, they know their values, they know the value they can offer and bring. They're confident and they're competent. And so having a personal leadership philosophy is the first piece. The second is who. They say, who do I identify as? Well, all these leaders, and it's at nauseum sometimes in HR, but they identify as a business person with HR expertise. And we put lip service to that, but these leaders really know the business. They go deep on the business. And I think that's a fundamental factor. And then the how piece is how they show up. And I think this is what courage a lot of times is about. It's about, are you business focused? Are you a relationship builder? Are you a strategic and critical thinker? Are you an influential communicator? And are you an HR and talent strategist? And if you look at all the competency models around HR, they're all kind of around those 5 areas. The difference is when you're a director, it's a different level than when you're going to be a CHRO. A CHRO, you have to have a higher level of business acumen. You have to have a higher level of relationship expertise, et cetera. But for me, the what, who, and how great HR leader framework was the big aha, and especially on that leadership philosophy, because almost all the leaders I've had on the podcast, they're just great people. Like they're people that would be successful doing anything. I think they could lead other areas of the business, not just HR. Typically, that's just how strong they really are.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And in the how they show up, I think sometimes that's where the courage kinda comes in to, um, really to lead, quite frankly, rather than to respond, and but you have to have that acumen and confidence and experience to be able to do so.
Yeah, and I think, well, just on that point too, I think the other piece is there's courage that we see, I guess, and there's stuff we don't see, right? And I think what we're not seeing are the conversations that HR leaders are pushing back with their CEOs or business leaders to help them make the right decisions when maybe they're going to go off the reservation, or they're not thinking straight, or they're thinking about cutting a corner that might be against the value of the company or ethical, and whatever those degrees of gray might be. And that's what you want HR leaders to do, is to be that quiet. I think you ever said this earlier, be that mirror, right? Be that kind of quiet partner, thought partner, and help them think that through in a very intimate relationship where people know that they have that confidence, right? I think that's the first piece. Now, what we do see sometimes though with leaders, HR leaders, and I think it's more and more, we see HR leaders who are deciding to frankly opt out. They might be burnt out and they're deciding to take a different path, and maybe they can't do their best work there. Maybe they don't feel supported. And so you're seeing courage, I think, of some HR leaders saying, I'm going to do this on my own, or I'm going to find an organization that better supports it. Because so much of what we do is determined by that business leader's perspective, and whether or not they support what we, let's say, fundamentally think great HR is, or the right things. If they support that idea of people first, or people are great assets, then we can support that. But sometimes that is not always the case. And I think a lot of CHROs are voting with their feet and taking different paths.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why we're seeing such an influx now. Almost, 50% of the workforce is choosing to be in the gig economy, which means, they're just using their expertise in different ways. And when you're, especially as a CHRO, right, a lot of times you're part of the face of culture along with the rest of the leadership team. And if there's a values level disconnect, I always say that's unsustainable. What'll be interesting is I almost wonder if we'll start to see some of those really great leaders start becoming like COOs and some other functions, functional execs to start to really make those changes in those areas, maybe where they weren't getting kind of the receptiveness from this when they were wearing the CHRO hat.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think, the jury's out in terms of what does a CHRO look like in 15 years, right? What's that path to CHRO? How's technology impacted? Do we see more MBAs or more business focused individuals come into it? I don't know if we really know, but I do think that it's going to continue to shift and change from where it's at today for sure.
I'm sure you get asked all the time, well, what is the future of HR? And you're like, well, that's why we're having lots of conversations too, right?
Yeah. If only I really knew. If only
Yeah,
I
yeah,
knew.
exactly. You look in your crystal ball. Um, when you think about that balance, right? That HR leaders balancing courage, and risk of either organizational pushback, potential failure, or even like rejection, right, from their peer set or the organization. A lot of people are afraid of their jobs. Um, how do you see? Have you talked to people kind of balancing that?
Yeah, I have. I think, being an HR leader is not easy, as you know, or anyone listening to this conversation knows, is a very hard job. But as an HR leader, doing our job means risking our job. And that is a fundamental tightrope that is very challenging because sometimes some organizations, some leaders will kill the messenger, right? And don't want to blame somebody for something that's happening. But if we're doing our job the right way, I think there's three things you have to do. And you may be risking your job, and maybe it's a perception you have, maybe not be even really realistic. It just might be a fear you have as possible. But our job is to put ourselves out there, bring up different perspectives that maybe we wouldn't have typically, or maybe a leader wouldn't hear. And that can be risky at times. Or say, hey, I think we're thinking about this the wrong way. The way to do that, in my mind, is you got to have deep understanding of the business, right? You've got to be credible and have context to push back. I think if you want to be successful pushing back, this isn't the pushback just for pushback. It's pushing back with really one clear agenda, which is that you have no agenda except that the business and their leaders win. And I think the hard part for HR leaders sometimes, and myself included over my career, is not so much I had an agenda, but I certainly had a point of view. And if I have a clear point of view and I'm pushing that point of view, it starts to become an agenda to a leader. And when you start to have an agenda, you lose the trust and that idea of being really, hey, I'm there to help you and support you. And I wish I would have learned that a little earlier in my career, frankly. But the reality is the idea of no agenda is really important, right? And the last is that you've got to be clear on your intent. And you've got to say things like, my intent in bringing this up is to help you understand optionality in this decision making, not to critique where we're at or the decision you're about to make. I think a lot of times we just don't do those three things very well. But if the CHROs I know that are great at this, they do all those three things masterfully and with finesse.
That's powerful. I wish I had learned that earlier as well. And I think going through my coaching program is actually where I learned a lot about, not leading from the front. It's not about the agenda or being right or whatever. And it's really about, and then explaining, because the other thing is sometimes you assume that people understand why you're asking, right? Like I have a continuous improvement mindset. I'm always thinking about what else can we do, but that can feel like you're critiquing someone or looking backwards and that doesn't feel good to anybody, right?
Well, and also I think, just to build on your point, how do you give yourself permission with that leader to critique or ask more questions? It's really, there are sometimes a project is so important that you may need to say, hey, I really see this project as mission critical for the business. And so you're going to see me asking a lot more questions to push the team's thinking because I want to make sure we get the right decision or come to the right outcome. and just upfront saying you're going to do that. I mean, that takes courage, even just giving yourself permission. But I think a lot of times we don't frame it up that way. And so then if we haven't framed it up and we start to ask those questions, that's when we get into trouble. And they're like, well, Jamie, why do you keep asking so many questions this week? Versus like, we're not telling them that we really care. We're thinking about it. And I think HR, we got to get better at that. So I think it's a great, great point.
Awesome. As you know, we're in this really dynamic time. And for me, it's like a really exciting time to be an HR leader, actually, because this changing world of work and the pace that it's happening is happening so quickly. From your perspective, what do you see some of the most courageous shifts that HR leaders are doing to help their organizations adjust to this changing world of work?
Yeah. I mean, man, the shifts. I mean, there's so much going on. You think about this one, it's hard because no one's got a crystal ball. No one knows where we're going to go and where we're not going to go. And so, yeah, predicting the future is just challenging, even with the name future of HR, because most of us only see the future through the lens of today. Right. And so it's just so hard to do that. But I do think one of the big shifts, one of the big courageous choices that organizations are going to have to make is around for every business leader, not just HR leaders, but how will AI impact their business model, how work gets done, how the culture of the organization is going to change, how much is going to be augmented versus automated and, human enabled and all the different buzzwords around AI. I think there's a lot of choices that have to be made there. And I really believe HR needs to be diving in to lead that shift so that we're not being left behind. This is not a technology project. This is a people business organizational challenge, and technology will help drive in some of that. So to me, that is the biggest shift I see that I worry about and think about not only for my own kids, but for HR leaders. Are we doing enough to keep up with this and understand how to get ahead of what's happening in technology?
Yeah, it's such an opportunity to co-create and push ourselves to learn in areas that, nobody's an expert yet, or that you're not totally behind if you're not an expert, because a lot of people aren't experts yet. Um, all right. So as we looking ahead, what do you see as the most critical, courageous choice for HR leaders to make in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think the most courageous choice HR leaders can make in the next 3 to 5 years is investing in themselves, investing in the function. Um, Even with the downside we're going to hear or a leader saying, hey, we can't afford that. And I'm not saying invest in my programs. That's selfish. That's not the point. I mean, really truly investing in the skills of what does it mean to be in HR and expanding those skills a little bit more. Thinking much more broader as if we really want them to be business leaders, how do we get HR people real business experience? If we want them to understand and redesign work like an AI engineer, how do we get them those experiences? I think, I have a model called the value creator model that I really think we're evolving from a business partner to a value creator. And it's really a mindset and behavior around innovating like a product manager, thinking like an investor, understanding ROI, having a theory of the case, really, really understanding why would you invest in this program or not, building brands like a marketer, not falling into the feature trap of we've got 40 hours of online content. It's like, what does that 40 hours of content do for you? What does it do for that leader? Right? We've got AI sentiment analysis in our employee engagement survey. Great. What does that do? Oh, it'll help you understand who's disengaged in your team on a daily basis. Oh, that's much more interesting. That's a benefit, not a feature. Right. And then I think AI is the same thing. It's like, how do you redesign work like an AI engineer? And there's a lot of work to be done because right now we're just using it as a productivity boost, helping write emails or job descriptions, which is awesome. That's great. And it's very, very helpful. But we haven't redesigned work where AI is at the center, where you're going to get real scale or real, real big in productivity enhancements that we're looking for, or frankly, just game changing ways to do things different that we just haven't even done before.
Yeah, I love that. So investing in ourselves, and even I heard a little bit about being willing to admit where we need that development, right? Or where we don't know, and then go learn, right? Like go find ways to learn and get exposure. So our final question here is really just around if you could leave every HR leader that's listening, or leader in general, with one mindset shift about courage today, what would it be?
Action beats reflection. We only learn who we are and what we believe when we take action. So speak up in meetings, raise your hand for that new and challenging project, and make a difference, honestly, like only HR can.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, JP. If people want to find out more either about you or your programs, I know you speak and you help in HR transformations. What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, go to futureofhr.com and sign up for my newsletter. Check out the podcast. And thanks again, Jamie, for being on. Thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you so much for being on The Courageous Choice. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Have a great day. Thank you for listening to The Courageous Choice. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review to help get the word out about the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future conversations. If you'd like to know more about gig talent, please visit gigtalentagency.com or email us at podcast@gigtalentagency.com. See you in the next episode.